At Odd and Ends by Control Dog / Patrol and For the Wolfie. Summary. Hizashi Yamada has just been announced as the most desired bachelor in vampire society. Of course, it's no wonder he's desired. He has a large house with servants, is handsome, rich, and talented, and suitors are practically barging down his door, whether he likes it or not. Life is looking up for Hisashi, and he has little to fear, as long as his secrets remain locked behind closed doors. However, his life is about to change forever when he decides to buy a personal donor. A vampire needs blood to survive after all. Unfortunately, the donor comes with secrets of their own, and it's only a matter of time before their locked doors are blown wide open. Shouta hates the leeches more than any other vampire slayer, but his options are running dry. Desperate times call for desperate measures, and Shouta is certainly desperate. However, the human has a plan, and he is willing to risk his life and his pride for it to succeed. Will Shouta be able to trust the vampire in his new life, or are they destined to be disposable pawns in his desperate plight? Secrets can only stay hidden for so long, and time is running out. Written by For the Wolfie. Art by Corndog / Patrol. Chapter 1. Buying a donor. To call the night cold would have been a grustique understatement. The air was so crisp it made his lungs ache. Icy mists clung to his suit jacket, and pavement appeared shiny and damp where he stepped, besides the lack of rain. A series of oil lamps did their best to divide the darkness, but the white veil that ghosted the scene drained the world of any possible comfort. It was a cold night for anyone who wasn't a creature of the night. Luckily for Hizashi Yamada, that description fit him perfectly. Very few souls stalked the factory district at this time, although the tall chimneys bellowed thick clouds of smoke high into the night sky. In the center of the district square stood a tall tower, where giant gears tumbled against one another to power the old clock face at its tallest point. The minute hand creaked to the right and momentarily elapsed the hour hand, resonating a deep chime that made his monocle shudder. Hizashi pulled a pocket watch from his suit pocket and florically flipped it open. The gold was caught by a stray line of light from a tall oil lamp, spotlighting the engraved "For You" on the outlid. He wound the device forward to match the towering monolith. The temporary fix was weighed down by two realizations. Hizashi's watch was, once again, in need of repair, and he was late. He put the watch away, but before he could hurry on through the damp night, a third problem arose from the frog. A trio of humans. They were large and fierce, and the blonde wished he had brought his bodyguard as they approached him. "Them some fancy clothes." The first figure dawned, his geometric hand hovering up and down as he swept him over. "Going to a party or something?" Before Hisashi could speak, the second answered the question for him. "Nah, looks too tacky for that. Doesn't matter anyways. Think he'd rather have some fun with us?" The third was silent, but their dumb nod of approval didn't improve their stance whatsoever, nor did their actions when they decided to grab him by the arm and laugh. Hisashi could take these three easily, but he wouldn't be able to do so without consequences, so that only left one option. "Hey, listeners," Hisashi said with a wide grin. "You really got me at a bad time." Despite the poor lighting, it would have been impossible for these three thugs not to notice a sharp pair of fangs that punctured his smile. Judging by the way their bodies jolted, they all landed on the desired conclusion. They were messing with a vampire. The third thug instantly released him and gulged something that could have generously been called a sentence. "A monster!" The second looked just as mortified as he backed away. "Shit, he might take over our heads." While the duo looked ready to flee from the reveal alone, the first was made of stronger stuff. Them stories are bullcrap. I heard a vamp can't do shit except drink a bit of old blood. Besides their weird magic shit, it's random. Leech probably got something useless. Before the man could insist a sense of bravery in his comrades, Hizashi stepped closer. It was time to get serious. He could see his own reflection in the stranger's eyes. Hisashi's long, blonde hair was heavy with the damp air, and he could spy two green glints, his own eyes. However, as he watched, the green turned to a sharp crimson, and the thugs openly flinched. Hisashi's grin only drew wider at the sight of goosebumps breaking across his neck. Their heartbeats were thundering like racing horse. Hey, listener, I'm always up for a bit of fun. Care to test that theory? And just like that, the thug lost their nerve. You bloodsucker ain't worth the trouble. Let's go, guys. Then the three turned tail and left, leaving Hizashi to the solitude of the streets. He exhaled with relief and flickered his eyes back to green. The ability for a vampire to change their eye color without being in a blood frenzy was a simple parlor trick, akin to crossing one eye, but it had gotten Hizashi out of trouble more times than he could count. He sighed, drifted back to the steam-powered motor lift. The clock informed him he was only growing tardier for his appointment, and Hizashi took the hint to hurry. What the thugs had said about vampires were somewhat true. The only real leverage vampires had over humans were quirks and quick healing. A quirk was a sort of power each villain was born with, usually based on their parents' quirks. The only humans who had them were half-breeds. While there were tall tales of vampires turning humans with a bite, they were inaccurate and impossible. In truth, a vampire could only be born of two other vampires, while half-breds were the result of a human and a vampire. They were quite rare, though. Although Hizashi had sharper senses than a human, he wasn't especially stronger or faster. Blood was a necessity to survive and helped fuel a vampire's amazing healing abilities, but it didn't have to be fresh. Most of his kind existed on bags of blood bought legally from humans. As much as people hated his kind, fed vampires are far less trouble than hungry ones, and their literal blood money helped many of the poorer human communities to thrive. His very reason for being in the area was for an appointment to take home his very own personal donor. Any blemish on his record would have made such a deal impossible. So, despite the fact that Hizashi was walking around a human quarter by himself in the dread of night, he was an upstanding citizen with a squeaky clean record. He guaranteed that. The building was tucked away between two larger ones, and the hanging sign was hard to read in the gloom, although the government certification in the window was helpful guidance. Hizashi steps inside and was immediately greeted to the warmth of an unattended fireplace. He exhaled in relief and removed both his top hat and jacket, planning to hang them on the rack, only to find the establishment lacked one. Without much alternative, he begrudgingly put them back on. A small bell rang above the door, alerting the store owner of the guest. The counter was quickly manned by a young woman with green hair. Her badge read Fugikazo. Hey there! You're super duper late. She laughed like there was some joke there. Sorry, he said with a sheepish grin, although he kept his fangs as hidden as possible so he wouldn't scare her. I have a few excuses, but I doubt you want to hear them. Nah, she snorted and pulled the document out from under the counter. I hope you like giving autographs, 'cause I need your signature a tunny. Her heartbeat shifted suitably, as if something was off. Hisashi leaned against the counter as casually as possible. Shouldn't I meet the personal donor first? She looked thrown off by the request, and her heart raced further, although she tried to mask it with a laugh. I mean, yeah, totally, you can't see him, but he's already signed everything, so... The woman inhaled deeply and finally said, Look, he's very top quality, I promise. So, they were a man. Hisashi glanced back to the entrance window, where he could see the back of the government certification. This place was legally certified, so why was she acting so odd? But the woman instantly deflated, to the point that she looked possibly sheepish. He might not be what you're expecting, is all. Hisashi tried to figure out what she meant by that. Nowadays, there were strict regulations around personal donors, humans who were hired to keep their handler well fed. Only the buyer was allowed to drink from the human, and never without their consent. In exchange, the human had to be properly cared for, with all their needs seen to whenever possible. It was a symbiotic relationship, and Hisashi was finally planning to open his home to one. Humans didn't look too kindly on personal donors, but it was a good option for people without family, who were desperate to survive. Just a bit of bloodletting, and they would live in the lap of luxury for as long as they wanted. The ones Hisashi had encountered before were all the same. They had come from different backgrounds, but had been given a soft and content life, and they'd been allowed mellow and spoiled like pets. He'd expected his own to be exactly the same. Tell me about him, Hisashi said, an eyebrow raised high. Oh, well, he's a perfect match. He has very exquisite blood quality, has great blood circulation, is very healthy, has the necessary B blood type. One of the few pieces of uncommon knowledge was that vampires had to drink from humans with their same blood type, or else they risked turning feral. And yet you sound worried about them, Hisashi said, as he leaned a bit closer to the counter. What aren't you telling me? The woman looked like she was formulating an excuse, but ultimately gave up. Come through here, sir. He was led behind the counter and through a door marked Waiting Room Number 2. Hisashi was prepared for the worst when he entered, which was why he was so thrown off at the sight of a man who waited for him. Despite the numerous chairs, the human had taken to pacing, but they immediately turned to look at him when he entered. He was about the same height as Hisashi, with long black hair that hung over his neck and face. There was a clear scar beneath one eye. It, along with thick, coarse stubble, that gave him a roughish appearance. His clothes was typical for a new donor, consisting of loose blouse that didn't cover his neck. He was decently handsome, and Hisashi's excitement grew. Although he typically had amazing self-control when it came to blood, the knowledge that this handsome guy was his made his fangs yearn to sink into the unscarred skin. Then the human spoke, and Hisashi instantly realized what the woman had been hinting at. You the vampire that bought me? He asked, his dark eyes narrowed in on Hisashi like a hawk. The tone was chipped and abrased. Typically, new donors were shy and scared of vampires, despite their eventual ease into their new, cushy life. But there was none of that coyness here. You're late. Hisashi had to avoid making his grin too sheepish. He was determined to make the right first impression on this human. I would have come earlier if I'd known you were waiting for me, Hisashi said as smoothly as possible, offering a wide grin. The human retorted with a scathing look. You did know I was waiting for you. Shouta! The woman quickly said, taking in a forced sing-song voice. We talked about this, remember? The human was seething beneath the skin, but when he spoke next, there was less bitter in his tone. I've signed everything. Hisashi leaned against the wall. No wonder the woman had been pressuring him to sign the papers without a meeting. He imagined most of his peers would instantly demand a different, respectful donor. The humans were just as screen as the vampire handlers, so only vampires of prodigies could afford to take care of one. They were not only accustomed to respect, they expected it. Well, I haven't signed anything yet, Hisashi said, amused. The anger amplified on the handsome man's face. Maybe I won't. You seem to be the ungrateful type. Shouta, as the woman had called him earlier, immediately stamped in his direction and bared his teeth.
Why would I be grateful about?
Shouta! The woman stepped in again, catching his attention. She laughed like it was some joke and smacked him on the back a few times. Really sorry about Shouta here. He's just cranky. He's been waiting for a while. Her hands stilled on Shota's back, and the expression on his face shifted drastically from anger to bitter.
Sorry,
Said the human, although it sounded like he was spitting the words.
I'm just tired.
Hisashi listened to the heartbeat carefully, but found it didn't vary from its slow, steady rhythm. Why'd you want to be a professional donor? Hisashi asked, still leaning against the wall. Shota exhaled as if he was releasing whatever anger he felt, and when he finally answered, his voice was softer.
Life's been hard, and I need to change it. I heard you could live a comfortable life as a blood bag.
Hisashi raised an eyebrow at the term. It was the derogatory name that humans called personal donors, but he never heard someone in his profession use it. However, Shota's heartbeat hadn't changed. Either he was telling the truth, or he was an amazing liar. Fugikato relaxed a little at his lesson anger, and she stepped away from him. Although Shota comes from a good bloodline, he's had a rough life and really wants a chance at something different. Fugikato grinned, as if to justify his earlier rudeness. So, about signing those papers. Look, I have a pen right here. Hisashi finally pulled himself from the wall and shrugged. Nah. Both humans stared at him in shock. Huh? Asked the woman, dumbfounded. My friends would be horrified if I brought home an impolite human. They'd never let me live it down. Hisashi turned his back, trying to hide his grin. It was a joke, of course. If he didn't take in this abrasive donor, then he doubted anyone else would. So that left it up to Hisashi to help him. He started to leave the room. I'm sure someone else will take him, but Hisashi froze mid-step. His heart raced as an overpowering scent hit his nostrils, and all his senses were instantly transfixed. There was no doubt on what it was. Blood. He forced his body to turn around slowly, and his eyes landed directly on Shouta. The man had clawed his arm with his own nails, to the point where red rolled from the open wound. Yet his heartbeat remained unchanged. Hisashi had never smelled anything quite so delicious. His mouth watered at the sight of it, and his fangs trembled, insensibly, elongating without his permission. One thing was for certain. Fujikato hadn't been lying about this guy's quality.
This is what you want, right?
Shouta asked, his dark eyes set on Hisashi.
Sign the documents, and my blood belongs to you.
Hisashi wished he hadn't forgone blood over the last few days, but he wanted to savor his first taste of fresh donor blood. His eyes burned, the telltale sign that they've turned red, although guilt hurtled through him at the sight of the wound. Had his teasing been convincing enough to make the human act in desperation? Treat the wound, Hisashi told the woman, his voice muffled by his enlarged fangs, although he hid them behind his sleeve. I'll sign the papers. Hisashi exited the room and shut the door behind him. To compose himself, the scent faded, and he was forced to swallow large gulps of air to calm down. The pile of documents sat in front of him, but it was difficult to concentrate with the thought of that crimson liquid filling his mouth. Even without the other reasons for wanting Shouta, his blood offered enough incentive to grab the awaiting quill and begin signing his name without reading it. With each signature, Shota's blood became more and more his, although he preferred to think of it as Shota's safety being assured. Just when his final signature was in place, the door to the waiting room, too, opened, and out came Fujikato and Shouta, with his arm, now bandaged where he hurt himself. The scent of blood was gone, blocked beneath the specific design fabric. Good timing, Hisashi said with a lopsided grin. At least his fangs had returned to their normal size. All sign. Guess I've officially adopted him. Shouta glowered.
I'm not a pet. This guy was lucky Hizashi was the one signing the papers. Don't worry, sweetie, Hizashi purred with a wink. I'll take extra good care of you. Shouta seethed. Fukikado snatched up the signed documents and quickly checked them over. Everything looks perfect, Mr. Yamada. Thank you for your patronage. Shouta, here is officially yours. The human trained her scowl on her for the wording, as if he hadn't practically said the same thing earlier when he had clawed his arm. The woman offered Hizashi some documents to take home, mostly just certifications to confirm that Shouta was a legal donor and hadn't been kidnapped from the streets. I've already briefed Shouta on his role. We'll check in on him periodically to ensure you are treating him well. If there are any issues, including his behavior, she shot Shouta a quick glance. Please let me know. If necessary, I certainly will. He smiled pleasantly and offered his hand to Shouta. It's a pleasure to properly meet you. My name is Hizashi Yamada, and I do hope we can get along. The man didn't look pleased at all, but he relentlessly stepped forward and shook his hand. His grip was strong, as if he'd been intending to hurt him with the forced formality. Shouta. Hizashi held his hand just as tightly. He already knew his experience would be vastly different to what he's expected, but perhaps that wouldn't be entirely bad. No, Hizashi was looking forward to this. Let's get you home. If only Hizashi knew who he was really shaking hands with. For Shouta wasn't any typical donor, simply seeking a cushy life. He was a racerhead, one of the world's best vampire slayers. And the slayer had a plan. I am so happy to be doing this podfic. I love this fanfic, and I'm so happy that I got permission to do it. And you know, it's so fun. All the images that are used for every chapter, which will be different, right, are images that are posted in the fanfic and are drawn by corndog_patrol. The link to their Tumblr will be down in the description. I love their art. I mainly follow them on Tumblr for their eraser mic stuff. But yeah, I'm so happy to be able to do this podfic. I will say, there is eventual smut. So for those chapters that have smut, I will be age restricting those. I'm sorry, not sorry. I'm age restricting those, right? Nobody gets to hear me say that stuff if you are a minor. No, that is my one boundary. If you want to read that and for some reason you can't read it, right? Let's say for some reason your channel or your YouTube is, you know, underaged. Go read it in your own time. You ain't hearing me say that. No, that is where I draw the line. I will eat my pride, but that part of my pride will stay intact. It's not even pride, that's just morals. But yeah, so just know that the actual chapters that have smut will be age restricted. So if all of a sudden you don't see a post, or I think you could still see the post, you open it up and then it tells you that it's restricted. Alright, so like you'll know when they're restricted. You could go read it on yourself, you know? But yeah, that's just a boundary that I'm gonna set because that would make me feel safer. And by safer, I mean morally okay. But yeah, there will be eventual smut. I think it happens once or twice. As I said, it's been a couple months since I read this, and I think I vaguely... I know yeah, I think it happens at least once. I know at least once it happens. I think it was twice. I'm not sure, though. You know, maybe it was just once. I don't know. Maybe I'm imagining the second one in my head. But yeah, I will be giving you guys notes on the fanfic, and I'll tell you if these notes are notes that have come to me recently or not. Like, for example, these notes that I'm going to give you. Timeline. This is something that just came to me, and I don't know why I didn't notice this in the first read. They're set in, like, the oldie days. I didn't know that. I didn't pick up on that the first time reading this. The whole quill, the oil lamps, it's, you know, oldie days. I didn't realize that. I don't know why when I first read this, I thought it was on modern times. Next one is, this fanfic uses big fancy words. I knew this. This isn't something that I just found out on my second read, no. But what I have found out is that it is one thing reading fancy words. It's another thing, you know, speaking out loud fancy words and reading out loud fancy words, because goddamn, this
fanfic. This chapter, I think this fanfic is gonna take me a bit more because these fancy words, although I could read them, some of them I can't pronounce them. Like, I read it and I read it somehow in my mind. And I understand what the word says, but I'm mispronouncing it in my little head. So I can't go around mispronouncing a bunch of words. So hopefully I'm doing a great job. It also helped me realize that these fancy words and the fancy way they're, put together, it's really, really hitting my dyslexia. Like, I had trouble with this one phrase where it's like I literally read it millions of times and I kept on reading it in the incorrect way. And I'm like, this sentence makes no sense. Is this a grammar? Am I going insane? I blinked a couple times and I was like, you know what? I'm going to stand up, I'm going to do a little turnaround, and then I'm going to sit down and I'm going to read it again. And for some reason that worked. And I read it. I'm like, oh, I was switching up the words. I was so confused. But yeah, fancy words, fancy way of putting words together. I do like this author's writing style. It's a really unique, interesting writing style that I don't see as often. And I really appreciate it. I had so much fun reading it the first time around. I don't know if I'm going to have as much fun trying to pronounce some of these words, but this is a really good fanfic, and I'm sure you guys are really going to enjoy it. The world building of this fanfic is really good. I really enjoy the world building, and it's just, chef's kiss. I love this so much, and I really hope that you guys are also going to enjoy it. I'm now going to end this because I have food that is waiting for me that I have not eaten yet because I have been too busy trying to record this and put this out on time. But yeah, as always, my raindrops, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Link to my socials are down in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content. And thank you so much for watching.